So today, we're diving into The Courage to be Happy, which is basically the sequel to The Courage to be Disliked by Ichiro, Kishimi, and Fumitake Koga. And if you caught our previous video on the first book, you know it was all about breaking free from what other people think of you and living on your own terms. But here's the thing, this second book, it goes even deeper. Because once you've got that freedom, once you're not constantly worried about everyone's expectations, you're faced with an even tougher challenge, actually choosing to be happy. And yeah, that sounds simple on the surface, but trust me, it's anything but. The authors are still working with Alfred Adler's psychology, and they present everything through this really engaging dialogue between a philosopher and a young guy who's trying to figure life out. And the central question they're wrestling with is pretty fascinating. If freedom is actually possible, like, if we really can choose how we live, then why do so few people actually choose to be happy? Like, seriously, why is that? So Kishimi and Koga make this bold claim right from the start. Happiness isn't something that just happens to you. It's not like winning the lottery or getting lucky with good weather on your vacation. It's not something the universe delivers to your doorstep when the stars align. Instead, they argue that happiness comes from the daily decisions you make, how you show up in your relationships, how you approach your work, and what meaning you decide to give to your actions. It's active, not passive, and this really challenges the way most of us think about our own well-being, right? Because how often do we catch ourselves thinking, I'll be happy when I get that promotion, or once I move to a new city, things will be better, or I'll finally feel content when this stressful situation is over? We're constantly waiting for the right conditions to show up. But here's what the authors are saying, that waiting, that's actually a choice too. It's a choice to keep pushing happiness off into some imaginary future that never quite arrives. So the real question becomes, what's actually stopping us from choosing happiness right now, in this moment? Now, according to Adler, relationships are at the heart of pretty much everything we experience, both the good stuff and the hard stuff. Every emotional conflict you deal with, whether it's frustration, resentment, anxiety, or just plain loneliness, can usually be traced back to how you're connecting or not connecting with other people. But here's where Adlerian psychology gets interesting. Relationships aren't the enemy. They're not these obstacles standing in the way of your happiness. Actually, they're the exact context where happiness becomes possible in the first place. Think about it for a second. When do you feel the most drained and exhausted? It's usually after some tough interaction, right? Maybe it's conflict at work, a misunderstanding with family, or that feeling you get when you think someone's judging you or dismissing what you have to say. And on the flip side, when do you feel the most alive and energized? It's usually when you feel genuinely seen and understood by someone, or when you've done something that actually helped another person. When you've contributed something meaningful to someone else's life. So here's the distinction the authors want us to see. We often think relationships are what limit our freedom. We look at all the obligations, the expectations, the responsibilities we have to others, and we think, man, if I could just escape all of this, then I'd finally be free to be myself. We imagine some version of life where we have no commitments to anyone, where we can just do whatever we want without having to consider anyone else. And that sounds pretty appealing sometimes, doesn't it? But Kishimi and Koga flip this whole idea on its head. They say, and this feels really counterintuitive at first, that true freedom is actually realized through relationships, not by running away from them. Because here's the thing, freedom isn't the same as isolation. Real freedom is the ability to engage with other people while staying honest with yourself, taking responsibility for your choices, and maintaining genuine connection. It's not about being alone on some mountain somewhere. And this completely reframes everything. That person who withdraws from everyone to protect their independence? Sure, they might feel temporarily safe, but they've also cut themselves off from the very space where meaning gets created. They've basically chosen loneliness and just renamed it freedom. Okay, so one of the central themes here is that happiness is a choice, but not in that cheesy, oversimplified way you see in a lot of self-help content. You know, like, just choose to be happy, as if it's that easy. The choice the authors are describing is way more nuanced than that. It's active and continuous. It's basically a whole way of living that's defined by contribution rather than consumption. So Adler believed that people become unhappy when they're constantly searching for validation. They want approval from others. They want praise, recognition, someone to tell them they're doing a good job, that they matter. But this search for validation, it creates dependency. And that dependency inevitably leads to disappointment. Because when your sense of worth depends entirely on someone else's opinion of you, you've basically surrendered control of your own life. Think about how much mental energy we all pour into managing other people's impressions of us. We carefully curate what we say, how we look, what achievements we highlight, all hoping that others will affirm our value. We're constantly running this background program of, do they think I'm smart? Do they respect me? Am I measuring up? But here's the paradox. The more you seek validation, the more fragile your sense of self becomes. You're constantly at the mercy of external judgment, forever anxious that you might not be enough. So what's the alternative? The authors argue it's contribution, just genuinely wanting to be useful to others in small, sincere ways. And the beautiful thing about contribution is that it doesn't depend on getting praise. It doesn't require recognition or a gold star. It's meaningful simply because it strengthens the fabric of our shared existence. This mindset completely transforms how you think about work, relationships, and community. You stop obsessing over how do others see me, and you start asking a totally different question. How can I show up in a way that actually supports the people around me? It's a subtle shift, but it changes everything. So through this shift from seeking validation to offering contribution, something really cool happens. Freedom and happiness start to become intertwined. They're not separate things you have to balance. They actually support each other. Freedom comes from not being controlled by what other people think of you. And happiness comes from living in a way that affirms your value to the world around you. And this is actually pretty profound because it resolves what feels like this inherent tension we all experience. We often think we have to choose. Do I want to be free and independent, or do I want to be connected and belong somewhere? It feels like you can't have both. But Adlerian psychology says these aren't opposites at all. They're actually two aspects of the same mature, well-adjusted existence. When you contribute without needing validation in return, you stay free. Because your actions aren't being controlled by how others respond to you. And you stay happy, because the act of contribution itself is fulfilling, regardless of whether anyone even acknowledges it or not. Now, Kishimi and Koga also take on this really common belief that our past defines who we are. And they're pretty firm on this. You are not determined by your previous experiences, your mistakes, or your failures. Instead, you're guided by the goals you set for your future. If you choose goals that are rooted in fear, like, I need to protect myself, or I can't let that happen again, you stagnate. You get stuck. But if you choose goals rooted in contribution, like, I want to help, or I want to connect, you grow. You move forward. And honestly, this might be one of the most liberating ideas in all of Adlerian thought. Because a lot of psychological frameworks will tell you to dig deep into your past, to understand how your childhood shaped you, how your traumas explain why you do what you do today. And look, understanding that context can definitely be valuable. But Adler warns against using the past as an excuse. There's a big difference between understanding your history and letting it run your life. The person who says, I can't trust people because I was betrayed once, has made a choice. They've chosen to let that past event dictate their present reality. They've basically built their entire life around protecting themselves instead of opening themselves up to new possibilities. But here's the empowering part. The past is only as powerful as you allow it to be. At any moment. Literally right now if you want, you can choose different goals. And when you do that, you're essentially rewriting the story you're living. Your past doesn't have to be your prison. But let's be real for a second. Choosing happiness isn't free. It comes with a cost. It requires vulnerability. It requires taking responsibility. And it requires having the courage to let go of some things that, weirdly enough, feel comfortable. The comfort of playing the victim, the safety of having someone to blame, and those familiar patterns of negativity that have kind of become part of our identity. And this is where the title really reveals how deep this concept goes. Notice it's not called the gift of being happy or the easy path to happiness. It's called the courage to be happy, because happiness actually demands something difficult from us. The authors point out that even though the path to happiness is technically open to everyone, not everyone is willing to actually walk down it. A lot of people would rather hold on to their resentment, their pride, or their self-protection, because these things offer a weird sense of security. And there is a strange comfort in feeling wronged, isn't there? It gives you someone to blame. It exempts you from having to take responsibility. It lets you say, my life would be so much better if only that other person had acted differently. Or, it's not my fault things turned out this way. But that comfort, it comes at a steep price. You stay stuck. You don't move forward. Happiness, on the other hand, demands openness. It demands a willingness to trust again, to give without guarantees, and to see yourself as someone who's actually capable of building a meaningful life. And yeah, that's scary. It really is. So ultimately, Kishimi and Koga land on a message that's both challenging and genuinely hopeful. Happiness is not something you sit around waiting for. It's something you practice, and it's something you share with others. When you commit to living a life of contribution, you stop needing to prove your worth all the time. You experience freedom not as this isolated detachment from everyone else, but as authentic connection with the people around you. And in that space, right where responsibility meets meaning, happiness becomes this daily act of courage. Every single morning, you wake up and you face the same fundamental choice. Am I going to approach today seeking validation from others? Or am I going to approach it seeking ways to contribute? Am I going to protect myself from potential disappointment by keeping my walls up? Or am I going to risk being vulnerable for the sake of genuine connection? The courage to be happy is the courage to keep choosing over and over again, even when it's difficult, even when you're not entirely sure it'll work out, even when the whole world around you seems designed to pull you in the opposite direction. You know what makes these ideas so powerful? They don't promise easy answers or some magic formula. Instead, they ask you to really examine the subtle ways you might be sabotaging your own happiness. The stories you tell yourself, the patterns you keep repeating, the safe but ultimately unfulfilling choices you make. And they suggest that on the other side of that honest examination, there's a different way of being. A way where you don't need anyone's permission to be happy. A way where you don't need everything to be perfect. A way where you simply decide to show up, contribute what you can, and trust that in doing so, you'll find the freedom and fulfillment you've been searching for all along. And honestly, that feels worth exploring. If you found some value in today's video, I'd really appreciate it if you'd hit the like button. It helps the channel out a lot. And if you want to keep exploring ideas from powerful books like this one, go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.